Wireless LAN Professionals Podcast, episode 145.
Wireless LAN Professionals is a place to educate, inform, encourage, and entertain those involved in wireless LANs. This Wireless LAN Professionals podcast is an audio manifestation of these goals. Our host is a wireless LAN veteran, consultant, designer, and teacher, Keith Parsons. And now, the podcast for wireless LAN professionals by wireless LAN professionals.
Well, Manon, thank you for being here today. How are you?
I'm very good. How are you, Matt?
I'm doing really well. So, last time I saw you, you were helping me manage and run the WLPC in Phoenix, and we had some great adventures. And I just want to say again, thank you for all your help with that, and just pouring into the community. It meant a lot to me, and I know Keith was very grateful, and all the people that were blessed because of your extra help. So thank you.
It was my pleasure. I always have a tremendous fun running around with you. Yes. And, living through those adventures. And I get to meet the rest of the community because unfortunately, I see them only once a year.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And you made probably one of the most important discoveries at the WLPC Phoenix, and that was a special little coffee shop, if I remember correctly.
Oh yeah, Cartel. They are awesome. I like my coffee. I'm the kind of third wave aficionado that really likes decaf coffee. Some people could argue that it's not really coffee if you don't get the buzz, but I like coffee for the taste. So anywho, I discovered Cartel, and I think I'm going to place an order pretty soon for new beans because they were really, really awesome. So, one of our challenges for next year is going to be to figure out a way to get really good coffee, like maybe get them to bring a truck over or lend us a machine, or I don't know. That would be awesome.
A daily morning Cartel run or something. That would be great. So anyways, besides coffee, the other thing we want to talk about is congratulations to you. Something really cool just happened. And if you were on Twitter, I'm sure you saw the announcement, but you just made CWNE, correct?
Yes, I did. Actually, I sent in my application on the first day of WLPC Phoenix 2017, 18. Did we say 17 or 18? So anyway, a few weeks ago. And so I sent it my application and got a reply last week. It was really awesome to be granted number 275. I wish I had done it earlier than that, but I'm really glad it's done. It's over with. But, we have, that I have a Slack channel. I've been on this podcast talking about that Slack channel before, and I've had several discussions about the process of reaching CWNE and which exams to do in what order. And I remember asking the same question to Keith way back when I was getting ready to do CWNA, and which order should I do the exams? Which is the one that's more important and whatnot? And there's always great discussions about that. And it's only the beginning to reach CWNE. That's the one thing that I've told a lot of applicants, because to me, I got a great foundation, but applying this foundation and learning is an everyday process for anyone that's in IT, especially in networking. Yeah. So really, it's the official start of my wireless
next
career.
level of exactly.
It's not the start of my career, because I've been in networking 16 years. I've been in wireless 14, but really it's a new chapter, and I feel now that I have a strong grasp on wireless, on my understanding of wireless. So that's really awesome. CWNP has allowed me to do that. And the other thing that's really cool is that I work for a university. We have been with a vendor through most of my career. we're slowly changing those habits, and CWNP is vendor neutral. So I got to learn the neutral stuff and not just the Kool-Aid of my vendor.
Yeah. So, so let's go back a little bit, or let's go back a ways and kind of talk to your journey. When, how did you get started in just wireless industry? And then what led you to say, what certifications and what decisions did you end up making in the path that you actually took?
Well, that's actually a funny story. The very first class I took when I started studying IT, we had to do this presentation on a promising technology, and Cisco had just come out with their very first wireless LAN adapters and series of APs. And I had no idea what I was talking about, but I was trying to explain how it worked. And it was this, I mean, we're going back to 1999 and it's in 2000, and it's just getting started. And, people, and I'm with a bunch of students that have no idea about networking, and the orientation of the program was telecom, but I'm really the only one that ended up doing telecom. The other ones ended up doing programming and sysadmin and stuff like that. So it's kind of awesome that it started that way. And then I didn't really think about wireless after that for a little bit. I did routing and switching. I completed my CCNA. I completed CCNP, and I was really into advanced routing and stuff like that. And then we started to try to unify the wireless networks that were being deployed on campus. And we had this big project to have voice, and we were one of the very few universities that were actually considering wireless at that time. So it's like 2004 or something, 4 or 5, that we started doing the site surveys and implementing wireless, first in the science department and then eventually through the campus. And at that time, I was starting my permanent position at the university, and they needed to have something to, like a special project to put me on to prove that I had the chops to do my job. And I got assigned to wireless, and I mean, that started the love story officially of Manon and wireless. And it's been awesome ever since. Of course, back then, the university didn't have much budget, and I learned a lot on my own and through like mentoring relationships with a guy that has passed, but he was awesome. His name is Nico Buisson.
That's cool.
And Nico and all the other guys, Steve Williams, came over to help us, and then we got a lot of help from our SE at work, and so I sort of learned on the job, and then I wanted to get something more official. That's when I started really doing CWNA. Actually, I got the very first book. I digging through my books 2 or 3 weeks ago, I discovered my very first CWNA book, and I read through the book but didn't take the exam. And it's unfortunate that I only really took the CWNA 2 years ago, because I had read that book and several Cisco wireless books through my career, and I could have taken the CWNA quite easily, I think. Only
didn't you? What was the holdup, or why were you not pursuing that more specifically like that?
Well, actually, I was busy being a mom. I have a 5-year-old, and I didn't have time at the time to really sit down and concentrate and really go through the process. That's the only reason. Right now, I could tell you, if there was something I could change, that's what I'd do. I'd go back and take that exam and push myself way more. Mm-hmm. Because chances are that I wouldn't be 275. I'd be 75 had I done it.
Yeah. So fast forward now, CWNE, when are you starting to make that decision? Like, yeah, I need to go for expert level. Was there people around you telling you should do that, or was that just a decision you made on your own?
Well, a couple of years back, I had some health issues, and to get back on track and really motivate myself, I needed a project. And I decided, okay, there are a lot of exams, but I can do this. And I was looking up at people like Devin and Keith and the Davids, and I was like, okay, girl, you really have to do this. And I gave it everything I had and managed to do it. Of course, my son's older, and my husband could take a part of the load at home, so I get some free time to
focus. Yeah.
So yeah, I have more time to focus on my studies, and right now I'm actually enrolled in another project, and I've enrolled in college, and I'm finishing up my degree. So
very cool.
It kind of started the engine. CWNA started the engine, and to keep it going, well, I need my projects. I did the four exams, and then I've gotten involved in the WLA, in the standards committee, and in WLPC, obviously.
Yep.
And I got called on to do really awesome projects too, like the CWS and CWT. I helped Tom Carpenter with the tech edit of those books.
Yeah.
And they're really, I mean, if you don't know whether or not you want to get started in wireless, if you just want to read a quick book and see if it's for you, those two certs are really, they're really basic, but you're going to get a taste of it enough to get you started and say, okay, yes, I want to do this. So I got to work on those projects. I got involved in the CWDP and CWAP GTAs because the exams are getting reworked. So a couple of weeks back, I was with a bunch of subject matter experts trying to define what the next objectives and tasks and tools of CWDP holders and CWAP holders should be, and that what's coming from CWNP is really awesome. So I'm really glad.
When you jump in, you go all in and don't just do a little. You do everything.
Well, we've worked together. I think you know that about me. I tend to push
find the solution.
Yeah, find the solution. Pedal to the metal. Let's
go. And you get things done for sure. Very cool. So talk to someone who maybe is in the boat. They've been in the job. They feel fairly competent. They've got a full workload, and they keep kind of thinking about CWNE. What would you say to them? How would you encourage them? What would you tell them to expect?
Okay, what would I tell them? First of all, you have to do it for yourself. You're not doing it for your job. You're doing it because you're really passionate about Wi-Fi. There are tons of resources, great blogs, mentors out there, classes that you can take, great training that you can get. Don't stick to only one vendor, and all it really takes. I remember when I started studying for CWNA, quote unquote, formally, I was coming in the office around 5:45 a.m. because the only time I could see where I could really study was between 5:45 and 7 a.m. Because my son was in daycare. I had maintenance windows in which I had work to complete in the morning. And when I was getting home, well, I'm a mom, I'm a wife, so I had stuff to do.
Yeah.
And so it's only an hour a day. give yourself an hour a day. What's it going to be? I mean, you're going to watch TV for an hour a day, of course. Like everybody does it, but what is it going to give you? So, I decided, okay, I'm going to cut down on TV, and I managed to do CWNA and CWSP that way on my own. The two other ones I had to study, but I did take classes, the awesome classes by Devin. There's of course there's lots of other companies, and CWEP is famous for being the class by Peter McKenzie.
Yeah.
But anyway, so it's really just a question of choose yourself first, choose what you're passionate about. I mean, it could be Wi-Fi, it could be music, it could be anything, but of course you're going to gain a lot more by efficiency by knowing your RF and your basics.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that you're going to know it all and you'll never face any problems. It's not because someone is a CWNE that they're not learning every day, but at least you have the foundation to actually really get to the bottom of things.
Yes.
It gets you to a point where your curiosity is at the expert level. That's what I'd say.
Yeah, I remember Fernay saying kind of like what you said earlier, is just that it really feels like the start of something new. It's the beginning of something, not like the accumulation. Oh, I'm an expert, I'm done now. It's actually the beginning of kind of a new.
Yeah, it has ascending, and I'm not. Of course, it's not the same thing. It's not exactly the same thing. It's just an example I'm using, but it's like someone that wants to do like physics research and gets their PhD. I mean, it's you've done the thesis and you've got your PhD, but really, you still haven't found anything.
Yeah.
See, I mean, you can go into research and search for years. I mean, it's just the start of the journey. So anyways, if someone was listening to this and wondering if they should go through with their projects, if you're passionate about it, sometimes it'll still be hard, but it's worth it. And if anything, you're going to gain great mentors, great friendships out of it, and amazing knowledge. So
someone who isn't familiar with what it requires, what are the actual steps that you have to go through for the CWNE?
Okay, so you have to complete your CWNA, which is the basic. You can go through there used to be a cert that was CWNT that's been retired. So the very basic certs are CWS, CWT, and then you go to CWNA, and then CWAP. It's been debated, but I'd start with CWAP, then DP, then SP. That's the order I would take them in. That's not the order I took them in, but that's how I do it.
And why is that order the one you recommend?
AP shows you the innards of the protocol. You're going to get like knee deep into protocol analysis, spectrum analysis. And once you have a good handle of that, then design becomes, I wouldn't say easy, but more...
it connects the dots a little bit more.
It connects the dots. Yeah, I was going to say more evident, but that's obviously a translation from French.
Yeah.
It's just, it's not going to do itself on its own, but it's going to make sense way more. So, but the order I took them in was DP, APSP, just because I tend to do a lot of DP stuff.
So that's the certifications, and then what's next?
What's next? I have to finish up my degree. I want to retake CWAP because the new version's coming out at the end of summer, early fall. And having chats about it with Peter McKenzie makes me want to take his class so much. I really have to manage to take it. And that's the awesome thing about all those classes is whenever you take them, as I said, it's never really done. So you're learning something new every time. I mean, Keith was saying the same thing, and he's been in this business for a number of years, and it's awesome because you learn something every single time. So I really want to do that. I want to finish up my degree, and then I don't know, maybe CCIE wireless.
Yeah.
Well, I work a lot on, you're going to dare me to do something and then.
Or tell you can't do it, and then you'll definitely have to do it.
Yeah. That's exactly it. So one of my teachers in college told me that I would never be able to do CCNP. I did CCNP. And then he said, there's no way you're going to be able to do CCIE. So I might be tempted to prove him wrong. But that's just me.
So going back to the actual certification process, you said you take the preliminary certifications, and then what's the actual next steps in the CWNE process?
So the consensus and what I suggested, I do it if I had to redo it, would be CWNA basics, and then CWAP, CWDP, and SB.
Okay.
And I think the consensus in the community is that order, not that you have to take it in a specific order. And then you have to go through the CWNE certification process, which is a whole other game. You have to have 3 references. You write 3 essays. The board likes to see 3 essays, one on each topic of the professional level exams, which is approximately what I did. And then, so you have your recommendations. You have to have a written requirement, publication requirement. So if you give classes or if you give lectures or you have a blog or a podcast, you have to show that you know your stuff and that you can explain it.
Yeah.
Yes, you can explain it to someone else. So what I did is I did a webinar on Wi-Fi metrics with Tom Carpenter. Oftentimes, CWNP is going to come up with suggestions of things that you could do to meet that publication requirement. So I pinged Tom, and he suggested we do that podcast together, webinar together. Yeah, it was awesome.
That's a great idea.
Yep. And I mean, if you can explain it to someone, then I think you can say that you've understood it.
Yeah. So they're seeing and looking at evidence that you're able to explain it in a way that shows you're not just regurgitating test answers, but actually explaining the concepts.
Yeah. In IT, we call it paper cert, but
yeah. Great. So you went through all that process, and then
well, CWNE, as I said, is not really a test. It's an application process. So you hand in your essays, your application, your publication requirements, your references and everything. And then the board reviews it and asks you questions if you have left some areas not well documented or anything. And then they will take the decision whether or not they grant you the CWNE. And that's a peer review process. There's a CWNE board. They're all CWNEs, and they review applications, and they're doing that on their own time. It's a voluntary exercise. And they're really, I mean, you can look up who's on the board. I'm not saying that because they've accepted my application, but they're really awesome people that are involved in the community and that have decided to volunteer their time to help their other Wi-Fi peers.
Yeah, and to enrich the whole community and Wi-Fi at large.
Yep.
Beautiful. So any other last things you would say or comments or tips or anything for those who are on the journey still towards the CWNE?
Well, one of the best things that I've read about getting ready about for any certification exam actually came from the process of doing the CWNP curriculum. It's Blake Croney that says that you should always study from the exam objectives. So that's what I tried to do. I still try to do it even for my university classes. Mm-hmm. And that has helped me a lot because sometimes you think that a book or class is going to teach you all about a topic. And really, the professor or the instructor is a human being, and maybe he forgot something, but he's still going to test you on it. So might as well take it from the objectives. So that's one tip. The other one is cue cards and Quizlets and all those things, and read blogs and get involved and talk to people and share experiences. I mean, there are so many resources. There's the WLA, there's WLPC, there are other great conventions. There's the Slack groups, there's Twitter, and everybody that I know of in the wireless community is welcoming and is going to give you a hand. Sometimes they have their own things to do, so they're not going to answer right away. But in the end, I mean, if they can, they're still going to lend you a hand. And that's why one of the very first things I did when I got my number assigned is to thank Devin and Keith and Gregor and the Davids and Tom Carpenter and all the people that have helped me get to CWNE, because, it's not something you can do alone. You're going to have questions, and you're going to need mentors, and you're going to need people that know more than you to teach you what they know, and that are willing to share their knowledge.
Well, May, that is very cool. And congratulations again. And thanks for taking the time and just sharing your experience.
Well, thank you.
10 Talks.
All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about why dual 5 gigs. Oh, crap. Sorry, that's the wrong prezo. We're actually going to talk about polarizing figures in wireless. So just a little bit about me real quick. CWNE 253 was sitting in this room last year without having completed any of the certification exams whatsoever. Sped through the 4 exams and got my application in to get my numbers in October of last year. So for those of you out there that may be sitting in this room with that same thought today about, can I really do this? Where do I want to go? It can be done. Just take time, diligence, work through it. It's a great program. You'll learn a lot, even if you're like me and you've been doing this for a while. So if you want to get in touch with me, social media, blog posts, blog.theitrebel.com. Again, that's theitrebel.com. For those of you that don't know, I'm from Mississippi. My college mascot was the Ole Miss Rebels. So therefore, IT Rebel, put 2 and 2 together, you'll figure it all out. Pretty active on everything, respond as quick as I can. And unlike Matthew, you can tell the true salespeople in the room, they've got fancy little clickers and all. I don't. I like to walk around, so you'll see me jump back and forth and tap a slide here or there. But anyway, so what I want to talk about today is polarizing figures in wireless. No, we're not talking about Devin, we're not talking about Ben, we're talking about antennas. The things that surprisingly seem to be pushed a lot in the industry. I know we've heard from Exceltex, we've got people here from Ventive. They're great products, but how many of you can count how many times you've seen external antennas used in your organization? How many of you use external antennas in your organization? Okay. Thank you. We have the right crowd here today, so I don't feel totally off. I face this battle a lot with customers. You go to a customer, you have a meeting, you try to set out what the expectations are, what they're wanting to do, where they want coverage, where they don't, and it never fails that we always come back to the solution of, well, I want that nice, shiny indoor access point, right? With the integrated antennas, something that I can literally, as Ronco used to say when he made the old timer rotisseries, I'm gonna set it and forget it. I wanna put it up there, I don't wanna touch it, I don't wanna move it, it's just gonna stay there forever. So we talk about antennas. I've got some numbers here. These are vendor agnostic. I've talked to kind of polled a few vendors to see kind of what sales figures were like and all, and the access point lines that they have. So we see vendor 1, 2, and 3, 90%, 94, and 98. Anybody have any clue what these numbers represent? Correct. It's the percentage of APs sold with internal or integrated antennas in your product line. 98%. So out of all the hundreds of thousands / millions of units sold from that particular vendor, only 2% of those units are actually the external antenna variety. So why no external AP love? Okay, I'm a big proponent of external antennas. I do a lot in LPV, just like Chris did, as we heard earlier this morning with his deployment, recommendations and all, kind of how to streamline that process. In LPV, you can do internal antennas, but a lot of times what we find in LPV is we want to keep the signal away from certain areas and we want to guide it to where we want it. So reasons to use external antennas. Number one, aesthetics. Okay, this is the predominant factor that I see today in customer bases of why they want to go to an external antenna. I've done a lot of work over the years. I used to work for Maru Networks, now Fortaroo for Mitch over there. Been in cruise ships, been in college and universities across the world where they have aesthetic concerns because they're historical buildings, right? So one thing that you can't always do is you can't go into a historical building that's on the register and just put an access point up like you would want to. You have to be cognizant of how the aesthetics play into that building and what the guidelines and recommendations are for those aesthetic communities that we have to deal with and those committee members, right? Number two, construction and materials. We heard Blake talk about doing Wi-Fi on cruise ships. Blake and I have actually worked on a couple of the same cruise ships in the last few years, and the one thing that he mentioned was cruise ships are literally nothing but big metal cages with smaller metal cages inside of them. So what do you find happens in those places? We don't just run an Ethernet cable and slap up an AP in the room, but what we typically do is we use external antennas in those smaller boxes, in those cabin areas and all that you rent out for $200-300 a night or whatever that cruise ship may be worth. We do that so that engineers on board working on the ship can have access to the hardware and make changes and repair things without having to disturb the passengers on the ship, right? It also makes it a lot easier because if we snag a cable while the ship shifts or something like that, then we're just simply replacing a coax cable and not having to replace or pull a new wire or something like that in the ship. So it's very important when you're looking at your design to make sure that we guide that signal to where we want it to. We control the energy output by that AP. You know, I have a interesting case at my house. I live on the Gulf Coast in Mississippi, very much a hurricane zone. For those of you that are aware of a little storm called Katrina, yep, that was where I'm at. What I found is that with different construction types and all like that, you have different densities of materials, as we all are aware. So I have 2 access points on a 2-story home, one on opposite ends of the house. And what I found was that my wife always complains about wireless working in one particular area of our 2nd floor. So what did I do? Rather than shift the AP around, we did a little testing. I put a wall plate AP in. And that wall plate AP is probably only about 15 feet away from where the actual omnidirectional AP is mounted in the ceiling. But what I was able to do with that wall plate AP is utilize the radiation pattern of that antenna to put it exactly where I want it to and not spew it behind me to cause interference with the other access points in the environment. Environmental factors. We typically find a lot of environmental factors such as temperature and moisture lend themselves to using external antennas better than an integrated antenna AP. These I predominantly use in cases where I need to put an access point outdoors, but the customer doesn't want to necessarily have this strange looking figure hanging off of the building. So what we can do is we can drill a couple holes, put an external antenna up, silicone it right, then we're protecting the we're protecting the AP indoors and still getting the signal where we need it outdoors and not having to fight through glass and construction materials and all that we would normally have to deal with. So designing, like I said, do a lot in LPV. So what do we do in LPV? The biggest thing that we do in LPV is we try to keep the cell sizes extremely small. On the screen, you'll see a representative map of an arena that I was working on previously. AP mounting is somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 to 70 feet from where the users are going to be in the seats. We want to keep that small, that coverage cell small, so how do we do it? We can't go in and throw an omnidirectional antenna in, right? We would have basically one big coverage area for every single access point in there. It produces really poor results. I've seen it, I've been in afterwards, and it doesn't work. So we try to keep cell sizes small by using a 30-degree antenna, 60-degree antenna, some antenna pattern, right, that we can focus that energy on a section, and keep the user experience in individual sections high while not having to have users with a lot of latitude in which cell they're going to connect to. Because in LPV, we design for such large numbers, we have to keep those cells small and not provide a lot of overlap. We're not talking about doing voice roaming here. We're simply talking about providing that 1 to 2 megabits per second for users to upload their YouTube, their FaceTime, playing on Slack like some in the front row might be doing right now, Rob. But we're giving them low amounts of data, but yet we have to keep that cell size small because we may have 75 to 100 users in that environment. And as we've seen from some testing that Daryl showed us last year, some stuff that Devin's posted up, a single stream device, you're probably only going to get between 15 and 25 maybe per cell and not maximize the airtime that you have available on that channel. So design techniques. Drew, I got to have some fun with you on this one. I know it was all in jest. This is not the design technique. The cups are great, but you can't design like that. So how do I design for using external antennas? Trigonometry. Anybody have bad feelings of that word from high school when they had to learn it? Yeah, I know I did. Never enjoyed it. But trigonometry actually helps a lot. I use this a website called Triangle Calculator. It works great for helping me determine what the rough cell size for the antenna pattern that I'm going to be using in the environment is going to be. So as we see here, I'll put up a couple of examples. This is actually off of my CWNE application, one of my essays. So in the picture on the left, you'll see the triangle calculator. This is just a snippet of the website. On the right is going to be our kind of real world deployment scenario. So we're using a 30-degree antenna. We get the height by simply taking a laser rangefinder, going in, we're going to shoot to where our antenna is going to be at. We're going to get that height. We're going to plug that into our calculator. You'll see in this case, our height was 50 feet. So we'll use that in the long side on the right side of our triangle in the image on the left, plug in our math for a 30-degree beam width, and it's going to tell us our roughly anticipated cell size is going to be about 29 feet. Obviously, I know this is not, we're not talking about cells that are perfect circles. Obviously, we've all seen the antenna radiation patterns, right? But this helps you get some idea of how large that cell size is going to be so you can plan according to your environment. And then lastly on aiming, the one thing that I found works best is to build a rig. I took a couple of pieces of plywood, cut them to the antenna size that was needed, drilled a hole for a laser sight to be put in the middle, and then strap it to the AP as you can see on the image on the right. And that makes aiming these things so much easier and keeps you from having to go back and forth up and down stairs as well as, man lifts or whatever you might be using. So that's it. If you have any questions, hit me up on social media, let me know, be glad to answer them, and check out my blog. Thanks.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Wireless LAN Professionals Podcast, the podcast for wireless LAN professionals by wireless LAN professionals. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at Wireless LAN Pros for all the latest news and updates. And also connect directly with Keith on Twitter at Keith R. Parsons. Head over to www.wlanpros.com for this episode's show notes, as well as the latest in all things Wi-Fi.